Well, it amazes me how humble our next storyteller is, given all her accomplishments. Read her bio and you'll see for yourself. If my mother had known this woman, she always told me, make yourself useful. Well, if she'd known this person, she would have ended that with, like Joan Welsh does. Please welcome the most useful and accomplished woman I know, Joan Welsh.
Oh my, and I'm following these beautiful, beautiful stories. It's really something. And I'm kind of starting at the beginning of my adult life. And just for quite a few years, I was a stay-at-home mom. My husband, Don, was a rescue helicopter pilot in the Air Force, and we moved a lot. That's what I call and sometimes say to my friends, that was my Joni Air Force wife years. During those 7 years of Air Force life, including the year Don was in Vietnam, we had our 3 children, and I completed the last 7 units for my bachelor's degree. When Don got out of the Air Force, we settled in Boulder, Colorado, where I volunteered to a variety of organizations. And it was about 10 years later, it was just about 5 o'clock in the evening, and I had rushed home to be there when my children got home from their after-school activities. I sat down with a cup of tea, and I waited, and nobody showed up. I was the only one home. So it was just this amazing thing, like this bell went off, this sense of a granite shift in my psyche was that I didn't need to just be home all the time, that my kids didn't need me the way they had, and that I could be doing more than not just staying home, because I think that's really important too. But I began to think that I could do more with my life in addition to being a good mom. So I began thinking about what on earth I could do. I hadn't worked for pay since I had been a lifeguard in college and waitressing, and when I was a teenager, babysitting. I had my bachelor's degree, but I had never really worked professionally. So what did I need to do to be job eligible? Should I go back to school? Should I, I don't know, what should I do? So a few weeks later, I found an advertisement for volunteers at the Boulder County Women's Resource Center, and I was always interested in women's issues. And what they were looking for was people to be peer counselors to help women find childcare, jobs, legal and financial resources, and basically whatever they needed walking in the door. It was our work to try and find help for them or support or where to go to find it. While volunteering there, we began to see more and more women with their children coming to find refuge from abuse at home. They sometimes came first thing in the morning in their bathrobes and their children in pajamas. This was a time in the 70s when domestic violence was becoming recognized as a real problem, and programs for shelter and services to help these families were growing around the state and the nation. The organization decided to study the problem in Boulder and to see what could be done to provide services for these families that we were just beginning to see more and more of. So I was asked to lead a task force to see if we could begin to get a shelter in place and a program. So I gathered women in the community together, civic leaders, church leaders, members of local and human service agencies, among others, and we developed a plan to buy a house and fund the services that would be needed. I quickly learned to write state and federal grants for the purchase of a house and operating funds to manage and staff the new organization. It was a full-time volunteer effort. I think I worked some weeks 60 hours a week, and I was so into it. Over the next year, the house was purchased and renovated, all by local church volunteers. When it came time to hire the executive director, I applied, and I got the job. Boulder County Safe House opened its doors for women and their children in October of 1979. Our all-women staff included myself, 3 counselors, including a children's counselor, and 75 community and university student volunteers. The University of Colorado, of course, is right in Boulder, so we had lots of students who were amazing volunteers. The paid staff increased over the years, as did the number of volunteers. We learned from other shelters around the state and county. We learned from each other, but we especially learned from the brave women and their children who came to us. My mom once said to me, "Joni, wasn't that really hard and depressing work?" Yes, it was really hard to hear the stories of horrific abuse that was described to us. And I had no idea that people could do the things to these other people that they supposedly loved to the extent they did. But there are also times of laughter and fun, especially around meal times when the women gathered in the kitchen, cooking and telling stories and sharing with each other and laughing. There was a lot of strength shown in that temporary home. And we, the staff, learned from these women how to better serve their needs, and we were inspired by their willingness to work to change their lives. One of my first tasks, and I go back and I think of this, a lot of stories from that time, but a couple of my favorites are that one was I sent a letter to all the churches in town asking for help in remodeling the house that we'd bought and for donations. So the first donation we received was a check for $10 from the elderly woman minister of the Little Church of Miracles. That was a good omen. And then when we were nearly ready to open, like 24 hours before we were scheduled to open, after we had announced our opening throughout the county, and we had a waiting list of several women and their children ready to come, the house had been completely rebuilt and refurbished with donations of furniture, beds, linens, everything we needed except the downstairs bathroom still needed to be tiled. We had all the tiles and we had the needed adhesives, but we hadn't been able for anyone to do the work, and none of us had the skills. But that day, out of the blue, a woman called and said she and her daughter loved to do tile work and would come over that night after work. I have no idea where she even heard that we needed that. They arrived that evening with her daughter, a little girl, and they put her to bed on the couch in the living room and went to work. Early the next morning, I went right over to see their work and thank them. The bathroom was gleaming, but they were nowhere to be found. It was as if the bathroom had magically been tiled. No one knew who they were. Someone thought one of them was a survivor of violence, But the woman who took their initial phone call had not taken down their names or their numbers. I tried for weeks to find out who they were, but to no avail. To this day, they remain anonymous. To us, they were angels. And I still have a picture in my mind of Rafa, a woman with 4 small children who were from a Middle Eastern country. Her husband was a visiting professor at the University of Colorado. Due to his abuse, she braved going against her culture to leave him in their home. She cooked special food that she'd brought with her and spread a cloth in the middle of the floor where she and her children sat in a circle and ate with their hands. She was beautiful and warm-spirited, and we all loved her. In fact, we became fond of all the women who came to live there while we found housing for them or moved them to another shelter for safety. So I say that everything I know, I learned at Safe House. Organizing others towards a common goal, managing staff and volunteers, raising money, writing grants, reporting to individual donors and grant makers, and I made lifelong friends. Finally, I learned about doing well by doing good. There's a wonderful Sufi saying, "Let what you do be what you love." There are hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the earth. And I would like to add, after 45 years, Safe House is still helping women and their children.